Everybody. I'm Muriel Bowser. I am the mayor of the best city in the world. Let me start by recognizing the members of the Council of the District of Columbia who have joined us today, and I understand that at-large council member Kenya McDuffie will help lead the council conversation. I also want to recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Glenn Lee. Give Glenn Lee a big round of applause. We are here today in the beautiful Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in downtown DC, and I am joined by members of my administration, and you're going to hear from them today. You'll first hear from the city administrator for the district and the my budget administrator, Jenny Reed. So we want to jump right into it. I want to let everybody know, I'm going to warn you now, because we're basically talking about two budgets today, so it's a lengthier discussion. We will try to break when appropriate for questions from the members, but we do want to be able to get through all of the slides. So we are very happy when it's budget day. We get to deliver our FY26 budget after many weeks of diligent work in responding to a crisis that was not a crisis of our making, but it is one that has real impacts on the city. So today we are pleased to deliver that budget. Director Reed and the city administrator are my lead budget staff folks, and their teams have worked diligently to deliver a strong and certified budget. So let's give them an early round of applause. And I want to call out at the offset that through their meticulous efforts, we have really blunted what could have been a catastrophic situation for city services this summer in fiscal 2025. And we have been very focused on a FY26 budget that both right sizes our spending and invest in our growth. So you've heard me say this before, and you've seen these numbers. And I think it's safe to say that 2024 was a comeback year for us. Last year, we had the fastest population growth of any jurisdiction in America, and we're back over 700,000. We continue to be the fastest improving school district. Violent crime was at a 30-year low. Our park system for 5 years in a row has been ranked number one. We have 28 consecutive clean audits. Our tourism recovered from the pandemic. We balanced our 29th budget. We led the nation because of an innovative partnership with the private sector in commercial to residential conversions, and you'll like this, Glenn likes this one, we had 52 days cash on hand. So that was our 2024 comeback year. And then we got hit with the Doge economy. And we know what that has meant for the city, and we're just going to talk a little bit about the impacts. And I think I'm turning it over to the budget director, who's going to talk a little bit more about that. But you've seen the reports, you've read the articles that the CFO, with our most recent revenue estimate, has forecast that federal job changes could lead to 40,000 residents who lose a job in the next 4 years. And the impact of that change is $1.1 billion. You know, I also firmly believe that the decisions that we make together can change that trajectory. And that is what we begin with these budget investments. So with that, I'll turn to Jenny, and I think we're also going to hear from Glenn to talk a little bit about I don't know who's talking first, the 2025 Supplemental and CR Fix.
Thank you, Mayor. We normally just go through our supplemental very quickly in these sessions and get right to the next fiscal year. We're going to spend a few slides talking about how we got through the 25 supplemental. The very important thing to keep in mind is that there's more than one benchmark we had to really comply with. The one that everyone talks about that was very hard to reach was making sure we had a budget for 25 that complied with the spending levels and spending authority outlined in the current continuing resolution. However, that wasn't the only benchmark we had to make sure we met. We had to also make sure that we had enough money to pay our year-end bills. So if we have spending pressures, we had to be able to address them. And we had to make sure we had resources on hand to meet our year-end obligations, such as repaying reserves that the CFO laid out. So it was not just one, but multiple benchmarks that we had to really work very closely with the CFO's team on to be able to have what is now a balanced 25 supplemental. And I'll turn it over to CFO Lee if there's anything you want to add.
It's really important that we had a vision of how these issues were going to be addressed before we can consider the full four-year financial plan, 26 through 29. So we appreciate the patience for all of us to be able to make progress in actually having a viable 25 plan that then sets the stage for 26 through 29. So thank you.
Thank you. On the next slide, on slide 4, we're going to spend just a bit walking through how we got here from a time standpoint. So some of you may remember is March 8th when the language that was typically included in CRs was not there that would have exempted DC's budget from a CR. That started a flurry of trying to educate members, their staffs on the Hill, on the part of the council for you to be able to educate members on the Hill that our budget is different, that these are our locally generated tax dollars that we be prevented from spending, not federal funding. That intensive process went all through early March. Around March 14th, we knew enough to indicate that we need to start to slow spending down. So there's an order from my office that essentially restricted some personnel actions, restricted travel, training, and some expenditures that we felt were prudent given the circumstance to be able to slow spending down. Then through the rest of March, we continued to try to get what we call the CR fixed, including a tweet from the president on March 28th asking the Congress to fix it in all caps immediately. During this process, we knew recess was coming April 11th. April 11th came and went without the Congress fixing our CR issue, and they were going to be gone for over 2 weeks. So we knew at that point that the strategy of educating people to fix the CR was not successful. We have to be able to plan and build a budget around the CR itself. That led to what we call the 6% solution, in which it's existing authority that allows the city to be able to increase its spending authority by 6% across its accounts without having to go back to Congress for approval. And that alone took weeks of close effort between our office, the CFO's office, the chairman's office, to really flesh out that as a viable legal concept that we think can withstand scrutiny. However, after that, really the day after April 14th, we issued a mayor's order where the mayor called on agencies to essentially freeze spending unless it's essential for both personnel and non-personnel services, so both people and contracts and grants. This led to a pretty dramatic slowdown of spending. The reason why is that we felt like if we're going to have to live with the CR, we can't wait till June to be able to slow spending down. We have to slow it down now to mitigate the effect of the CR and be able to spread that reduction through the rest of the fiscal year. And we asked for agencies to submit spending plans to us that they had not formulated, which is you have to now spend according to a much lower spending assumption with really about 5 months left in the fiscal year. Large agencies and small agencies alike had about a week to do it. So we got the spending plans back from small agencies on April 21st, large agencies about 2 days later. Now what this was, if you're in the standpoint of either the budget team or the CFO's budget team, is it is spreadsheets with sometimes hundreds for a single agency of lines. Each line is a person or a vacancy that has to get filled or not. And each line on a separate spreadsheet would be a contract or grant and the implications of pulling it back. And what we asked agencies to do is to assess whether you can pause this and tell us the effect on life and safety or on basic social contract. So not every issue or agency was going to be treated come out of that criteria in the same way. And across the agencies, it was looking at the end, literally thousands of rows of individual people to decide whether to not hire or hire in terms of a vacancy, and contracts to issue, not issue, or pull back on. And that's a laborious process that involved a back and forth with the agency, with the CFO's team, that led to us around May 7th determining, as a result of all this deliberation across all these spreadsheets, we believe we have a budget that will meet the threshold that the CFO applies in looking at, does it comply with the CR, do we have money to pay our bills at the end of the year, and is there enough cash on hand to be able to meet year-end financial obligations? However, his team couldn't take that for granted. They also had to do their own vetting process and go through those same thousands of lines of both people, positions, and contracts to be able to get to the point where the CFO was able to start their 10-day process, which leads us to today. And on the next slide, so that's the process. Jenny will talk through the math of how we actually complied with the CR.
Thank you, City Administrator, and good morning, everyone. So I get the privilege of walking you through a very complicated chart that I hope to simplify for you, but that really walks through all of the different steps and considerations we had to make along the way to figure out what was the ultimate gap that we needed to close. So let me orient you to the table a little bit. If you look down at the rows, looking at the left-hand column, these are what's known as the district's fund types. These are all the different fund types that go into our budget, and these all had to be considered on an individual basis when looking at the CR solution. So we couldn't look at the district's budget as a whole. We also didn't have to go so granular as to look at each agency, but we had to look at each fund type. So where we started. So the very first column shows what was our 25 approved budget. You can see by the different fund types, for example, local funds was $11.6 billion. Our total was $15.9 billion. If you look at what the CR would have limited us to our spending, that's the second column. So on local funds, you see it would have limited us to spend $10.7 billion. That's a variance of $945 million. So you have to look at that for each fund type, and that gets us to the total amount that we had to cut. We then went through a series of steps to figure out what were ways that we could mitigate or close that gap to the best extent possible. Many of you are familiar with step one. The mayor instituted what we call the 6% increase solution. That allowed her to raise the spending authority by 6% by fund type. So that column under step one shows you what the new spending limits would be by fund type. So higher than 24, but not quite all the way there. We still had some variance when you compared it to the 25 approved budget. However, if you notice in step two, if you look at the row of other funds, SPR or O type, you see the word solved. Well, that's because the 6% solution was higher than the 25 LBA. So we were set. We didn't have to worry about reducing that fund type anymore. The same was true for the enterprise and other funds. Then you had to take the additional step of making sure that the February revenue estimate supported the numbers under the 6% solution, because if we weren't collecting enough revenue, there was no way that we could spend it. And so when you checked those line items against the February revenue estimate, you saw that we now added a third fund type that was solved for. That is the enterprise and other dedicated taxes. The reason for that is the February revenue estimate came in under the 6% increase, which was under the LBA. And that meant that that was solved. The reason that that came in under, by the way, is because the mayor paid off the WARF TIF bonds earlier because they were overperforming. So now we have 3 out of the 4 fund types solved. We then went to look at the dedicated taxes line. Many of you council members are probably familiar with the fact that a lot of dedicated tax funds come with their own automatic appropriation authority, regardless of what the LBA sets it at. A good example of this is the Housing Production Trust Fund. There's language in the Budget Act that says, notwithstanding basically whatever revenues it collects, it can spend. So while we appropriate it at a certain level, if it collects revenues above and beyond the appropriation, even above and beyond 6%, the district has the legal authority to spend that revenue. So we examined each of these dedicated tax fund types. There's probably about 30 to 40 of them. And what we discovered is that there was enough there with automatic appropriation authority that we could now also solve for that fund type. So we've now solved for 4 of the 5 fund types. What we have left to solve for is local funds, and that was about $303 million. So if you jump to the right-hand side of the slide, you can see in step 7, we started with $303 million that we had to reduce, down from $1.1 billion. We then had additional ARPA local revenue replacement that comes with its own budget authority. That reduced the gap down by $50 million to about $253. But we then had to make 2 last adjustments to make sure the budget could reflect our needs today. So we had to make sure that we were addressing any spending pressures, and we had to make sure we were allowing for the appropriate amount of carryover to flow into 26 to balance the budget. So we needed another $43 million in reductions to cover spending pressures, a net $51 million of carryover, and that got us to the bottom line number of $347 million. If you jump to the next slide, once we had that number, then we could really begin to figure out what levers do we need to pull in order to close the gap. So in order to close the CR gap, as well as address our spending pressures and year-end needs, we did about 4 different things. 1, we instituted a hiring freeze, saving about $63 million in personnel costs through the remainder of the fiscal year. Importantly, we were able to maintain frontline public safety and education and summer positions so as not to interrupt programming. We made $175 million of non-personnel service reductions, contracts, grants, equipment, supplies, things like that. We shifted $202 million of expenses in 25 into 26 that we knew we could wait until October 1 to spend. This was mainly in the workforce investment account that pays for our collective bargaining agreements and the Housing Production Trust Fund. And then we converted another $160 million of local funds into special purpose revenue funds, which also came with a higher amount of appropriation authority. Lastly, we captured about $117 million of funds, excess funds through special purpose and dedicated tax revenues. And all of that let us not only solve for the CR solution, it let us address our $167 million of spending pressures and our $180 million of year-end resource needs.
So Jenny, if I could just jump in, because you've gone through the kind of the details of how we got here and the discussions that we had at the start of this, we have been able to allay, and we will not be recommending any furloughs or layoffs for the CR fix. And we will not have to close any of our facilities. So, our directors really spent a lot of time, if it came to this, to do this in a way that we would not impact, we would not overly impact services to the community, but we won't have to do that. We fully funded our police and teachers with this budget, and we won't have any changes to our summer programming.
Mayor, that's the sort of the slide run that concludes our discussion of how we got to the 25 supplemental. I didn't know if
Okay.
you wanted to pause here before we go into 26.
Councilmember, this may be, if there are anything specific about 25, this may be a good time to take those questions.
I mean, I'll ask members if they have any questions specific about 25, and that is before you go on to present 26, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about FY25? Looks like we don't at this point. Oh, okay. Councilman White.
Mayor, thank you to you and your team. We got a robust analysis of how you got here. What I'm trying to figure out, we did have to cut a significant amount of money, and if you could just hone in on that for a bit, what is it that the city is having to cut for FY25?
Well, the previous slide will show the gap that we're closing related to the CR and some of our end of the year needs. So specifically, we're pointing to $347 million worth of shifts or cuts. Next page. And when you add you're going to try to add up all of these numbers. It's going to be hard because they're shifts. Some of them are cuts, and we also have $180 million of year-end obligations that we added to our solve. So specifically, hiring freezes just for the remainder of the year gain us that $63 million, $175 million in non-personnel services reductions. Basically, these are shaves, some cuts, some changes to contracts and grants, and we will provide a full list of those to the council. We also shift, as Jenny has already mentioned, some of our workforce obligations into 26 and 27, or other obligations like HPTF, some projects that won't be ready until 27 get shifted there as well. So those are basically how we arrive at the reductions.
And when will we get an understanding of the non-personnel reductions?
We will provide it through your process, through your hearing process. I'm not sure which committee would take them up because they're across the government.
Okay. And then the $117 million of excess special purpose and dedicated tax revenues, what, can you say a little bit more about
Sure.
that?
Jenny, if you would kind of highlight, if there's some we can highlight there.
Sure. So this is across all of our special purpose and dedicated tax revenue fund types, and this would be just excess that they collected but did not spend from a prior fiscal year. And so we were able to capture some of those resources and use them to address spending pressures in FY25. And when we submit the supplemental to you, you will see a full detailed accounting of all of those changes.
Okay, I guess what I'm struggling with here is I very much applaud the services and programs that we won't have to cut. As I'm reading this, the suggestion that I'm getting is that residents are not going to feel this in a big way, which would suggest to residents and to me that these might be things that we could trim down as we are heading into a financial deficit. So I guess why did it require the federal government to intervene in our budget for us to be able to identify things that we maybe could have identified without this crisis?
Well, I mean, that's a question for you, council member. We make a proposal, and the council can address our proposal how you like. If there are agencies or programs that you wish to cut, obviously you can cut them during the council process. Likewise, you cannot create new agencies, you cannot add positions, you cannot do all of those things. And I think we do all have the opportunity now because we're freezing, and we have frozen over the last month or so some positions in the government. Some we're going to turn on because we need them, but we won't be turning all of them on. As it relates to contracts and grants, these are certainly, we identified first the things that we didn't think would affect, obviously, life, safety, and the core mission of the government, but others will be services that that are worthy and they're helpful, but they're not core. So it's the difference between making investments in core services and making investments in things that help make DC a great place to live, but aren't mission critical.
I guess I'll wrap up by saying in the budget last year, one of the things I pushed very hard for was a financial performance review so that we could uncover where we could save money in our government as we headed into more difficult times. That was a concept that got buy-in from the council, the CFO, and the auditor, but we had trouble getting buy-in from the administration, and I think these cuts show that there's room for us to work together on an audit across government to see where we might be able to save money, again, because we know that we are in a time, hopefully a relatively short time, of a financial deficit. So I hope as we move into next year, we can partner with you and the administration to get that done so that we can look at ways when we meet here next year where we are not talking about raising taxes, but talking about how we've identified inefficiencies and are using that to fund core programs of the city.
Right, thank you. And respectfully, Council Member, last year when we were here, we identified $500 million worth of cuts to our budget. The council added over $1 billion of spending. So I want to be clear about where we're starting. We can propose cuts, but you have to maintain those cuts. And so we need to kind of stay focused in on that. And as it relates to expenditure, commissions, and the like, I'm happy to entertain that, but I do think that we have the staff. I know I have the staff to do that work.
Okay, but can we do it in partnership with the council? So I'm not trying to get into finger pointing. What I'm suggesting is a fact, which is we couldn't get buy-in from this.
I don't know what that means.
It means the mayor said you are not going to work with us on a financial performance review.
I'm going to see if we can get a couple more questions in, if it's okay. We got Matt Fruman, who is next, and then we're going to go to Christina Henderson. Is the lineup? Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. I think we'll all be very curious to see what are the cuts that you deemed are not core, and that's a thing that in the fullness of time will be revealed. One of the things that we talked about the conundrum that we were in, is that we were going to collect the taxes and we weren't going to be able to spend them, and then at the end of the year we would have a big surplus and have not been able to meet needs in the interim. I'm curious, when I look at this, is the result of this that everything balances with the $167 million of increased pressures and the $180 million going to the available for end of the year obligations, or do we anticipate a larger surplus than had the CR not happened?
Sure. So I'll also turn to the CFO if he wants to weigh in, but we do not anticipate a larger surplus than what you see sort of on the balance sheet. So we expect to be able to solve all our spending pressures, and then the 180 to help meet year-end needs will go to pay back some of the contingency cash that we've used, as well as make sure we can pay for year-over-year increases in things like the school's advance. Now, the CFO still has another revenue forecast to come out, so we can't say for sure how it will end, but based on where we are today, there doesn't seem like there will be a big amount of revenue just sitting there that we can't spend. CFO, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, what we have done here is, especially with the $180 million of increased spending pressures and other obligations at the end of the year, one could say we've taken some of that savings to handle those obligations. What's really difficult is to separate the effect of the continuing resolution with all the normal changes that have to happen during a fiscal year. And this is true for any jurisdiction. So it's difficult to split those apart. And as you can see, what the mayor's office did with our support is look at the entire situation, all the spending pressures that they were normally need to deal with, as well as, and that you will need to deal with, as well as the implications of the continuing resolution.
And if I could just give like an example to highlight this. So we had a lot of snow in January. So we had a DPW budget, Public Works budget, that has a snow allocation. They go beyond the snow allocation because we have a lot of snow. That money's already been spent. That's about a $7 million pressure. So for the CR, not only did we have to comply with the CR spending authority, we had to make sure we went beyond it enough to be able to address the spending pressure from the snowstorm. Now, we would pay for that sometimes through contingency. So we both have to comply with the CR, make sure we pay our year-end bills, and then for a case like contingency, have enough cash flow to be able to repay back contingency. That's why rightfully people will focus on the cut as a result of the CR, but there are really three bottom lines we had to make sure we hit to have a budget that CFO Lee would deem to be balanced.
Councilmember Henderson.
Good morning, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Councilmember.
I know one of the things that was really big in terms of FY25 was the use of overtime. We have we're about to hit a stretch of a number of large public events parades and the like. But overall, heading into the summer, their number.
Somebody's phone, maybe? Okay.
A number of agencies who use overtime that some people wouldn't even think of, like the Department of Human Services, and then there's some others, OUC, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about how does the $180 million remaining allow for those agencies that still need to use overtime to be able to continue to do so?
Sure, I can take that. So, council member, what you'll see in the supplemental budget is both and. So we have added a significant amount of funding to many of our core agencies to address overtime that they've already, and we anticipate they already will incur. So Metropolitan Police Department, Department of Corrections, Department of Behavioral Health, Public Works, DYRS, many of those agencies. We never know how many events we're truly going to have to do through the end of the year. And so we'll keep watching that spending. And if it does start to exceed what we budgeted, we'll work with the CFO to identify underspending in other areas and move that around.
I think that's all we have for.
Oh, I had one.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Denise Lewis-George.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor and team, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And I truly want to thank you all for the no furloughs and layoffs that you've been able to do. So many district workers were having anxiety about this in the last coming weeks, and so really I truly appreciate it. My question is about, I know we have a hiring freeze of over $63 million in personnel costs. I know in the coming weeks you will make a decision about who will get, which agencies will have the unfreeze. And so I just wanted to ask sort of, what are you thinking about as far as what the criteria will be for agencies who are going to be able to have the unfreeze? And I'm really thinking about our mission critical agencies that have caseworkers and social workers that we want to make sure that their caseloads are not high. And so I just want, and traffic safety workers, we have a number of schools who, want traffic guards. I'm thinking about those mission critical ones, sort of what's going to be those factors and how are you going to consider, and can the council be involved in the conversation of who's in the unfreeze list?
I'll start with the end. So absolutely, like the baton gets handed over to the council, and we know and expect we'll be looking closely at 25. We're happy to be very open about the rationale and thought process we had. Also, things change in the city, so there could be a decision we made 3 weeks ago that something changes this summer. We have to work with you for an adjustment. So you'll find us very collaborative as you go through the hearing process. In the mayor's order, we're not going to lift the mayor's order by sending you the budget because we recognize that we still have a June revenue estimate, and we want to be able to make sure there's flexibility. But we want to, take our foot off the pedal a little bit. So we will be allowing for more waivers from the hiring freeze and the contracting freeze. But it will stay in effect because we want to be very cautious about our spending, given the uncertainty of the broader fiscal environment. And for social workers, we consider that a job in which the effect of freezing it would have an effect on life and safety.
That's right.
But that's something that we will work with you and other members to sort of explain our thought process. And if anything changes in the city, work with you for adjustments.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Allen has a question, followed by Councilmember Bonds.
Good morning.
First off, appreciate the work of you and your team. I mean, this is when it comes to the FY25 supplemental, this was a $1 billion hit that was thrust upon us, not of our own making, and I know your team has worked incredibly hard to come up. I'm sure, just like in the FY26 budget, there may be specific elements of the proposal we disagree with and we go back and forth on, but that's not to take away from the hard work that went into putting this in front of you, so thank you for that hard work. The question I was going to ask is, if Speaker Johnson is good to his word and they actually do fix their mistake, how does this, would you expect to put the $1.1 billion and just unwind the decisions that you're putting forward here? How would you look at essentially repairing the budget should the House actually do what they should have done long ago and give us our money back?
That is a logistics question that we only spend a little bit of time on. And we will continue to work with the Congress to get this reversed. So we will not take our foot off the gas as it relates to that, because, you know, we've already spent a lot of time talking about the weeks and time that we have invested in this process. But this is still a matter of the district, the autonomy of the district's budget. So we will continue to work on that. And I would have to, Charles, think about how to work with you on work with the council on changes if that happens.
Thanks.
Councilman Bonds.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor, and to your team, and to the many hours that you've spent, I guess hours, weeks, months you've spent on this budget. It's intriguing, I must say. I love the little boxes that Jenny attempted to explain to us, and we'll get through it. We'll read it 5 times and then we'll have it. But I do have a question about the workforce investments, and particularly just wondered how the negotiations that our union members will be affected, particularly if they go to arbitration, and I know that sometimes happens.
So it's a good question. So, and I'll be as clear as possible in my answer. So one way in which we were able to comply with CR, as well as the year-end spending needs, is push out to FY26 our workforce investment funds. This means for any large contract, such as MPD's FOP, the funding for that would be in October at the new fiscal year, and not this summer. That's a contract that is still in which we have issued a motion for reconsideration of an arbitration award. Moving forward for and there's an attorney's contract as well, that the funding to be able to pay for that, including retroactive pay, would be the beginning of October. That functionally allowed for us to be able to pull our spending down in 25, while impacting individuals not having to go to furloughs or facility closures. Now, moving forward for FY26 and beyond. So I'm not including attorneys, I'm not including FOP. We have in the BSA something that I think reflects actual reality if we had gone to arbitration, which is that for unions that do not have a contract for 24 or 25, so the past fiscal years, once you get to 26, the BSA would exempt the city from having to pay retroactive pay for those 2 years for any union that does not have an active CBA. So for a union that does have an active CBA, those obligations are met. For one that does not, we start in 26. And the reason I said we're trying to have the BSA reflect reality is that we don't have funding due to the layoffs and the revenue estimates. So had we gone to arbitration, there would not practically have been funding in the workforce investment to be able to pay out. It allows for us to begin more realistically negotiating for 26 and beyond.
Thank you very much. I know that's such an important arena for us to consider, and well, thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And let me just add to what Kevin has said. I take very seriously our obligations to our workforce, and our workforce has worked with us during the COVID times when we had to remake a budget in 30 days and delay some contract payments. Our union partners were at the table with us, and we'll need our union partners at the table with us again. Okay, let's.
Real quick question.
Oh, sure.
Just for Glenn, where does this actually leave our local reserves? Given the proposal.
This didn't affect our local reserves, and so effectively we expect roughly the same outcome as was at the end of last year, with the exception of contingency. And in addition, it also tops up the emergency fund. That's part of the 180 million as well. So the 2 federal reserves are addressed fully, but it does not affect the district's reserves.
Mayor?
Thank you. So we will spend some time going quickly through the next few slides and then into 26 proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Bowser.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that. And let me just add to what Kevin has said. I take very seriously our obligations to our workforce, and our workforce has worked with us during the COVID times when we had to remake a budget in 30 days and delay some contract payments. Our union partners were at the table with us, and we'll need our union partners at the table with us again.
Okay. Mayor?
I'll be very quick. This is a slide to remind everybody that we're really dealing with two factors looking at 26 and beyond. One, we have the revenue estimates that were much publicized, in which we have less revenue than what we expected. Now, that doesn't mean we'll have less revenue, but we'll have less revenue than we have in our current financial plan. But the other part that is equally important is we still see cost growth. So even if we had totally flat revenues that completely align with the existing financial plan, we still saw inflation and cost growth based on demand for services and inflation, particularly in health and human services, but not limited to that. So when we did the budget, we're trying to solve both for cost growth as well as for fewer revenues, which is why you see the two different colored bars there that reflect what we had to do grappling with how we approach the financial plan.
And so let me just talk about sort of the 4 strategies that we use to balance the 26 budget and financial plan. So first of all, we brought the budget into structural balance, so we made sure that we were balanced across the 4 years. We did not increase the use of fund balance during the financial plan. We did shift it around a little bit to meet the spending needs in any given fiscal year. We also made reductions. As you saw from the chart before, if we had not, we had to make reductions given the revenues and the cost growth. So we made about $243 million of reductions, including stopping new programs that had not yet started. We saved about $100 million in efficiencies through lease savings, energy savings, telecom savings, and smarter deployment of resources. Importantly, we made about $1 billion of reductions in what we call the out years of the financial plan. So that's FY27, FY28, and FY29. We'll get to the growth agenda in a minute, but this is why it's so important. If we do not change the trajectory of our revenues, those cuts will need to take effect. However, we have been able to make sure that programs can live through FY26 while we work on that growth agenda, and we hope to not have to take those cuts. You'll see throughout the slides as we go through, we also made policy changes to several programs where the costs were growing far faster than our revenues, and this saved us about $500 million in new costs that we would have otherwise experienced. Importantly, we did not introduce any new taxes. We captured unbudgeted revenues, and we repurposed our existing resources to ensure that they aligned with the growth agenda. And I will now turn it back to the mayor to talk us through that.
Okay, so I'll try to go quickly. You've seen some of this, but these are 3 important questions that guide my decisions on operating and capital investments. First one, does this investment keep people and families in DC and attract new residents? Does it create economic activity to fund city services and programs? And does it attract new businesses and create DC jobs for DC residents? So if the answer to those questions is no, that's something that we look very hard at to see if we need to continue to do it. We introduced this fairly recently about how do we attract business, jobs, people to the District of Columbia. So a big tenet of our growth strategies is to double down on business attraction and incentives, equalize some of our attraction dollars. We have included reforms to how housing and other development projects start. We have paused during this plan some of the BEPS and net zero requirements, parking requirements. We have included our Rental Act, which is TOPA reform, also in our Budget Support Act. We are proposing to repeal Initiative 82, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. And establishing sales tax holidays for restaurants. We recognize how important this industry is to the district's economy and how much trouble it's in. We have also reduced our the universal paid leave tax. It's a modest reduction, but I think it's an important one to demonstrate where we need to go with that. We're putting vacant lots back to productive use with some policy change. We are looking at our business licensing. We've delayed the sales tax increase implementation, and and we are improving transfer and recordation tax appeals. So you can see that there. We're also leaning in big on things that are working and how we shift our economy from one that is so reliant on federal jobs to one that is more reliant on growing private sector investment and jobs, including bringing the Commanders home to RFK Stadium. We continue our transformation and investment in the Capital One Arena in downtown DC, right here. We're investing in our theaters, including National, Lincoln, and Howard. We are reviving the qualified high-tech technology tax incentives, and we're happy to talk a little bit more about that. We're investing in tech, which I know showed up in a lot of my meetings with council members about tech incubators and startups. We're also doing something different, expanding gaming opportunities in the district with commercial, they tell me it's hot, commercial bingo, live poker, and blackjack. Finally, we are continuing our investment in downtown and our commercial corridors by hosting activations during the Capital One construction period, launching a Chinatown Renewal initiative. We are expanding. We got a lot of feedback about our residential to commercial conversions, and so, or the housing in downtown program. So now we're expanding that to Georgetown and the Mount Vernon Triangle. We're creating Gallery Square, which was part of our Gallery Place task force recommendations. We're also looking, and we're going to say more later about our federal strategies, but we've included one aspect in this growth agenda, and that's a master plan for Southwest DC. Citywide, we're looking at retail, and every ward council member has talked to me about retail. We are also looking at our vending enforcement and improving the policy and investment in enforcement. And we are expanding the mayoral telework policy by way of language in the BSA to include independent agencies. So, next.
So I will go through the next two slides very quickly so we can get into specific investments. The FY26 operating budget is about $13 billion for our general funds. It's about a 1.6% increase year over year of the 25 revised budget. So many of you know that's really not much at all. And we continue to invest 50% of our local funds into human services and education. Next slide. The capital budget is $2.6 billion for FY26, or $10 billion over the 6-year CIP. The largest share of our capital budget continues to be invested in DDOT projects, DC Public Schools, and WMATA. And now we will get into the specific cluster areas and some investments, and we've brought some special guests here today to help us walk through these investments. So I'm first going to turn it over to Deputy Mayor Kine to talk about some exciting investments in schools.
Thank you, Jenny. It's very exciting to be here now to take a moment to talk about the most important residents in our city's children. Schools are indeed the foundation of our city's resilience, and despite these challenging economic times, we are thrilled that the mayor's budget continues historic investments in the future. And we can be really proud collectively of these investments because we are investing in success. I think we all know by now that we continue to be the country's fastest improving urban school system, and we aspire to be a national model for urban public education with our strong two-sector system. Parents continue to vote with their feet as our enrollment goes up every single year. Chronic absenteeism continues to tick down, and of course, our graduation rates go up every single year. We have a lot that we can be proud of. Investing in this continuation of this remarkable journey in fiscal 26 includes many things, and I'll just share a couple of examples. Firstly, we've continued funding for our early childhood education system. Again, as I think we all know, DC is the pioneer across the country in early childhood education. And the mayor's budget maintains all the core funding for this system. The mayor's 26 budget also includes a 2.7% increase in our per student funding, which adds $123 million additional dollars to our public schools, and very importantly, pay increases for the backbone of our public education system, our teachers in DCPS and in our public charter schools. It also includes investments in evidence-based strategies to support learning, like our signature investment in high-impact tutoring. And to honor this vital investment, we actually have with us today Ms. Raven Kirk, who is behind the mayor. Please wave, Raven. Ms. Kirk has spent the last 2 years as a tutor working for AmeriCorps in Center City Public Charter School, and she has delivered outstanding results for her students. Very importantly, she also discovered her passion and has made the decision to return to Center City next year as a full-time teacher working for our public school system. So, thank you, Raven. Congratulations. Your work is an important part of our investment in our city's future and in our resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And while we were able to make a lot of these really important investments, as I mentioned earlier, we did have to right-size some programs and we did have to stop some programs that hadn't started. So one area that we had to pull back on in order to be able to afford these two items were two programs that had not yet begun, the Child Wealth Funds and the Child Tax Credit. And we know that these are important policy matters, and we hope that we can get back to them once the growth agenda kicks in. So now I'm going to turn it to our Deputy Mayor Appiah to talk about investing in a safe DC.
So what we know to be true and what Mayor Bowser always says is that there's nothing more foundational, a more foundational responsibility we have as a government than to ensure the safety of our city. And so we are encouraged by the progress we've made in working together to create a safe DC. We are down 22% in violent crime today over last year, and that's 43% reduction in violent crime since 2023. And so there's so many ways that we've invested over the past several years, and we're really excited, Mayor, that you continue to invest in making and helping us work together to have a safe DC. And so one of the key investments in the public safety cluster is our people. There are more than 10,000 employees across the 13 agencies that make up the public safety and justice cluster, and they are 24/7, 365 days a year working to keep our city safe and moving. And so it's one of our largest investments in PSJ. And so we're really excited to continue to invest in our pipeline to hiring, not just recruits, but our cadet program. And so we have actually one of our cadets, second-year cadet Anya Selman from MPD here. She is a DC native. And we mention that because our cadet conversions are one of the, truly one of our largest pipelines now into MPD, but we also continue to invest in ways to ensure that we are on our path to 4,000. We are committed to that, to ensuring that we have the number of officers that we need to keep our city safe. And so you'll see a $30 million investment in MPD hiring for more officers, but you've heard us say over the past several years that we have the force strength that we have, so it's very important that we continue to invest in technology as well that helps us to be able to continue to drive down crime. And so included also in that $30 million investment is for more crime-fighting technology and equipment. We also believe, and this is something that very much comes from the mayor, that across the public safety and justice cluster, we have the best employees in the country, and it's important that we invest in retaining the best. And so what you'll see here is something that's really exciting and important, which is a $1.3 million investment to raise the salaries of our 911 and 311 call takers, and to continue our recruitment and retention of highly skilled call takers and dispatchers at the Office of Unified Communications. We have made significant progress, and we are grateful for the work of the entire team at OUC, really our call takers and dispatchers who hang in there and answer the call every single day. And so we want to invest in them. And quite frankly, this puts us at the top of the nation in call taker and dispatcher and pay. So we have long time beaming behind us, OUC call taker Miss Johnson, who represents the men and women of the Office of Unified Communications. They answer the call. And so we are very, very excited about that. Another thing, and you'll see a number of different investments here, certainly our fleet. Like, we are people, we are equipment, we are technology in public safety and justice. So continued investment in our fire fleet with ambulances and fire trucks and our fireboat, making sure that we have all of the fleet that's necessary to keep our residents and visitors safe, as well as additional investments for our MPD fleet as well. And then the third piece beyond our people and our technology is Mayor Bowser says, and this is true, that public safety is, it takes all of us to make our city safe. And so we invest heavily in grants and partnering with community-based organizations that help us at the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, where we have nearly $100 million in granting with community-based organizations, and several grants that we've started really in partnership with council, with you, Councilmember Pinto, over the past several years to equip a number of different segments of our community stakeholders to help us with community safety ambassadors, with cameras, with all sorts of presence and technology that has really helped us in, particularly in our commercial corridors. And so you'll see two of our grantees here, Aaron Price from Downtown DC bid and Leona Agarides of the Golden Triangle bid, where we've made investments for the past couple of years that have helped us to really increase the safety in our commercial corridors. And so you'll see a continued investment in our Safe Commercial Corridor grants. So we are excited in continuing to work together to drive down, not only to drive down crime, but to really create conditions that allow our city to thrive.
Thank you.
And an important note sort of in the box here around the jail. So one of the larger investments we have in the existing CIP was a jail line for about almost $400 million. As the planning process has wrapped up, or starting to wrap up, it's clear to be able to build a jail of the size and quality needed, it probably involves $1.4 billion. So we would have to add about $1 billion to what is now a significant capital investment. That would probably take enough years to fit that in over the course of 2 phases that we're probably looking at, budgeted within our CIP, not being able to close the CDF for probably 10 or 12 years. We need to do something different. So we have in the budget funding to be able to finish the planning process that's been going on for at least a couple of years now. The capital construction funding in the CIP has been removed for the jail. And this summer, and I hope in the early part of the summer, DGS will issue an RFQ and RFP to be able to solicit interest for a private entity, not to run a jail, but to take out a debt issuance and build a jail that would both conform with the CFO's requirements and allow for us to much more quickly close the CDF. And I want to stress what this is not. This is not a private entity running the jail. That would be DC employees. This is an answer to a problem, which is that how on earth do we close the CDF, a common goal that we all have, in a time frame that is consistent with what that population deserves. And recognizing the cost, we're going the route of trying to have a private entity take out the debt, build a building that we occupy and run.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator. So now we're going to talk about our investments in Clean DC, and I'll turn it over to Rachel Joseph.
The Safe Urban Infrastructure Cluster leads the district agencies, communities, and the public, the visiting public, in maintaining a clean and beautiful district. I'm going to highlight 2 investments that Mayor Bowser has made, has proposed in this budget. In November, the Department of Public Works continued the seasonal leaf employees into a team that is focused on ensuring the cleanliness of all of the corridors entering and exiting the city. We have increased that to 80 staff members, and the mayor's budget includes $4.6 million to support continuing those 80 staff as employees into fiscal 26. In addition, in the fiscal 26 budget, Mayor Bowser is investing in expanding our extremely popular curbside composting program to serve 12,000 households over the 9,000 households that we currently serve. And sorry, Debria Lewis is here today from the Clean Corridor team. Debria started as a seasonal leaf employee, and she will continue on the Clean Corridor team into fiscal 26.
Thank you. Next, we'll talk about investments in housing and economic development. I will turn it to Deputy Mayor Albert.
Thank you. Mayor Bowser has had at the forefront of her agenda since 2015 housing and affordable housing for DC residents. Under her leadership, DC has invested more than $1.5 billion in affordable housing and housing production. Since 2019 alone, the district has produced 36,000 new homes. Actually, we've exceeded that number to date, which has blunted the rise in our housing costs. We want to get back to predictably investing in preserving and producing housing. And several weeks ago, the mayor announced that she is proposing to restore HPTF back to $100 million in FY26, as well as continue support of the AIR property program, which ensures wealth building for DC families, and $23 million in HPAP, which promotes home ownership. We are maintaining our commitments and momentum on delivering the new communities projects with $177 million in total investments across 4 different neighborhoods, as well as more than $52 million to support the DC Housing Authority. I would like to thank Heather Wellington, Chair of the Board of the DC Housing Finance Agency and President of African American Real Estate Professionals. Heather's leadership has enabled so many housing providers, large and small, to develop and maintain housing for DC residents. And our commitment to neighborhood development across the city has not wavered. And we are proposing continued investments in projects on the east side of Washington, as well as supporting our neighborhood commercial corridors. And last but not least, I do want to point out we are going to be entering into 3 consecutive years of national and international events, with World Pride actually just having kicked off for this year in 25. In 26 is the semi-quincentennial of the United States, which should be a year-long celebration called America 250. And so we'll be focusing our attention on making that as a successful event next year. And then last but not least, if we think about the cadence of what we have coming up for our city in 2027 is the NFL draft. So all of those things together are incredibly exciting cadence. Our work throughout the city continues, and we will position ourselves for near and long-term growth in housing, jobs, and revenue.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And we will now go back to Deputy Mayor Kine to talk about investments in our libraries and recreation centers.
Well, it's a bit of a tag team here because I'm going to ask first our fabulous Executive Director of the Libraries to share with us some investments going on here at the library. Rich?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Rich Reyes-Gavilan, Director of the Libraries. We're going to work on expanding this room for next year, so don't worry about it. In any event, in continued support of DC Public Library's award-winning Facilities Master Plan Next Libris, we're thrilled that there's $166 million representing significant increases in the capital improvement plan to fully fund 6 new libraries in Chevy Chase, Congress Heights, Deanwood, Edgewood, Eckington, Rosedale, and Shepherd Park. Thank you, Miranda, for all of her advocacy at home. We have, by the way, when you leave this afternoon, we've got some boards of our new Congress Heights library at the Metro Station at Congress Heights. It is a spectacular new building, or will be one, thanks to this investment. We're also pleased about an increase in the FY25 Supplemental for a renovation of the Petworth Library, something sorely needed. So thank you, Mayor, and thanks, team.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Rich, and thanks so much for hosting us today. We will now hear briefly from our fabulous Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation, who is dressed for Budget Day.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Bowser, for your continued investment. So we are the #1 park system in America 5 years in a row. because of investments, access, and equity. The budget proposes $188 million to support 22 recreation centers improvements. We see over 2 million visitors annually, and so it is appropriate that we make sure that we are accommodating them. We've had 600,000 visitors to our pools, and so with that, we recognize the need for a heated Olympic pool where there is a $3 million for the planning and design at the Carter Barron location. $26.3 million to support with capital improvements and HVAC and roofing and our playgrounds as well. One of the things I'm most excited about is a $400,000 stipend for coaches and volunteers. We recruit coaches to support with our youth programs, and it's necessary that we're able to give them back because many times they're coming out of their own pockets. We're excited about this $400,000 investment for stipends. And last, but certainly not least, we've heard from the families who have to commute to take their children outside of the district to participate in sports like track and the necessary for a sportsplex that will encompass all of these things that's proposed in the budget. And that's $89 million investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next, we will hear from Deputy Mayor Turnage for some of our investments in health.
Thank you, Jenny. And let me apologize for my voice. I feel like I'm dying these days. But I get sicker each day. I don't know what's going on. But this is a challenging time for. I'm sorry. This is a challenging time for health and human services, especially healthcare, given what's going on at the federal level. The mayor was able to make some significant investments before having to deal with the challenge of right-sizing the budget. The list of those investments are in front of you. They're all significant. Certainly the $8 million that we're going to spend to handle the increased utilization for persons who receive care for their developmental disabilities. We had a major adjustment to the dental rate. Frankly, hadn't been adjusted in years, and there's an $8 million increase in the budget for that. We also have money in to cover sickle cell anemia. And there's a wonderful new animal shelter, if you all have not visited. It is incredible. The director, Bennett, has done a tremendous job. $3.9 million, it's a beautiful facility. You should go visit it if you haven't. But, we also have to deal with the fact that Medicaid is growing at a substantially faster clip than the city's revenues. And just to remind folks, Medicaid is an entitlement program. That means once you're in, you are eligible for all the benefits that are in the state plan. And if you are a child, the benefit doesn't even have to be in the state plan. A doctor has to say you need it and we have to pay for it. So when you have that kind of program, there are only three factors you have to consider if you have to reduce costs. One is you have to look at the number of people in the program. Two, you have to look at the scope of the benefits and how frequently they are being used. And then you have to look at the price we pay providers. When you have such cost inflation, the most pragmatic way to control costs in an entitlement program is to slow spending by reducing the number of people in the program. And we've done that with three goals in mind. First of all, we have focused our eligibility reductions on those persons who are considered optional. We don't have any choice, because if you're mandatory, we can't cut your eligibility. So we focused the eligibility reductions on those who are considered optional, and then we targeted those beneficiaries who are at the high end of the eligibility threshold. But the most important factor is we're not cutting them loose from from insurance, but we're going to work with the exchange under the direction of Mila Kaufman, and they're going to design a basic health benefit program and also look at the commercial marketplace to absorb those persons who will lose coverage under Medicaid. This will help us address the $82 million spending pressure that Medicaid has generated. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So now we are going to talk about our investments in human services, and I believe that we are going to turn to Interim Director Pierre.
Yes,
great.
I'm here. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Mayor. So DHS is excited that this budget continues the Mayor's investment in making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring, with an almost $90 million increase to support the continuum of care for homeless services. We will continue with 24 hours in shelter access and with our case management and improved services for shelters. We will continue to invest $8 million in permanent supportive housing for families exiting the homeless services system and through FRSP or short-term family housing. We are very excited that we get to increase and expand DC Flex with a $5.6 million investment. So this will support approximately 460 families to create new exit pathways to family exiting either short-term family housing and FRSP. So this budget, the Mayor's budget, reflects more opportunities for families and diversifying options for exiting the homeless services system for families. We are also excited that we get a $5.1 million to provide an alternative site to better assist families with exits and diversion path from for families seeking services in Virginia Williams. We are also very excited that the Mayor has put $3 million in homeless prevention programs in our budget for next year. We do know that prevention and diversion services helped to decrease homelessness based on our 2025 bid count. So we do know that that homelessness has decreased 8% in the district from 2023 to 2024. And we are also very excited that this budget represents close to $60 million for a replacement site for the federal city shelter known as CCNV. We are very excited that we also get a brand new shelter for New York Avenue replacement. $43 million will go to a brand new shelter to replace the New York Avenue. Another $5 million for improvement in the Naylor Road shelter for families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And then before we jump to the next topic, as we've talked about in some of the other policy areas, we did have to make some adjustments to programs or services that were growing well beyond our revenues. And one of those was in our temporary assistance for needy families program. It's grown by about 48% in cost since 2020, and we were facing an $11 million increase for FY26. So we've made two modest adjustments in order to bring the program costs more in line with our revenue changes. One is to pause the COLA increase for benefits, and second is to adjust the temporary reduction in benefits for households who do not meet requirements for 4 consecutive weeks without good cause. And so now we will turn it to the CA to talk about investments in transportation and the environment.
Thank you. So I will just quickly highlight a few areas from our capital budget in particular for infrastructure and the environment. One is we continue to invest in multimodal transportation. It includes meetings with MADA's funding request. That would include the changes to bus service that will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks. Funding a pedestrian tunnel in the Noma neighborhood to be able to support different modes for people being able to get around the city. We also have substantial investments in some of our traditional infrastructure. So $331 million for bridge replacements and improvements, notably the 8th Street Bridge, but also some of our other vital bridges, as well as $400 million to maintain the state of good repair for the city's sidewalks, alleys, and streets. And finally, and notably, over $100 million to continue to make investments in what we know to be our high injury improvements. I will highlight one more investment that's not in the capital budget, but in terms of the streetcar. There is funding in the budget to continue streetcar in 26 and 27, so for the next 2 years. There's not funding for the streetcar current budget beyond 27. And what we want to do is work with DDOT to be able to what DDOT calls the next generation streetcar, which is making use of the overhead catenary electric lines to be able to have essentially buses that utilize those to charge a battery to more nimbly and quickly expand what is now the streetcar line out beyond where it currently goes. at a much more cost-effective rate than it would be to replace the actual streetcars, as well as to improve and construct the service lines going to those locations. So, but the streetcar will continue for that 2-year time as we plan for what comes next.
Thank you, City Administrator. And last but not least, we're going to talk about the investments in our government operations, and I will turn it over to ACA Rodriguez to kick us off.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Want to talk a little bit about the mayor's investments in government operations. We like to say that our cluster really supports all the other clusters and agencies in order to do their core missions. I'd like to ask the directors of the GovOps cluster to please stand up and be recognized. That's it. Go ahead, stand up, John. Yeah. Thank you. Just to highlight some of the major investments that the mayor is making, particularly at our schools, nearly $8 million for repairs and maintenance. Even though school hasn't officially gotten out, we're already looking towards students' return in the fall. These investments will allow us to really touch over 100 schools throughout all 8 wards and reduce at least over 2,000 work orders that we have for our schools. So this is a major investment for us. $17 million for critical system replacements at our over 700 owned spaces across the city. Again, these are major investments to ensure that our workforce is being efficient and safe. I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity. Again, this continues Mayor Bowser's investments in cybersecurity. As this city becomes more of a tech hub nationally and internationally, we want to make sure that doing business with the district is a safe bet. And then, as the mayor mentioned earlier, how do we make it easier to do business with the city? The mayor is going to be investing in a new CBE online marketplace that will streamline and make more efficient interactions with the city, as well as updating a very antiquated system that we have in PASS in order for the Office of Contract Procurement to work with the CFO to process a lot of our payments. Finally, legislation that really will work to require independent agencies to adhere to executive standards on cybersecurity. We know throughout the country and throughout the world, when we operate under common practices and best practices on cybersecurity and AI in particular, as we grow that capability, it will be important for all of us to be on the same page and to adopt similar standards. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. And just before we wrap, there's 2 other items that we looked at for right sizing. One is to make sure that we had a home for the archives. As you all know, we had talked about building a home for the archives at UDC. That is being repurposed, that site, to build student housing for our UDC students, which we're very excited about. We're not going to forget about the archive, so it will have a new home at the Charles Sumner School, which will be the front-facing archives. And then we have included $23 million to construct basically the storage facility for items that are not on display to properly house DC's archive material. And then lastly, as we all know, has been mentioned, we've had many challenges with overtime. We know staffing and recruitment and retention are obviously very important, but we also noted that we needed to put some tighter restrictions on our own leave policies in district government in order to make sure we were not relying on so much overtime. So we've made some modest changes to the number of weeks for caretaker of a family, defining the family member to include the immediate family member, creating a waiting period, and a 12-week work commitment upon return. And with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Well, thank you. I want to thank everybody for their hard work and participation. Council members, I want to thank you and acknowledge your patience. We had some unprecedented things to work through, and I'm proud of the resolutions that we have arrived at in the proposal that we submit to you both for FY25 and our 26 proposal. So I will be open to any questions you have. I note that there are 11 council members present with 5 minutes. That's 55 minutes. And then I just heads up to the press that we will reset this location when I've concluded with the members of the council and be available for any questions then. Council member.
Thank you, Mayor and team. Obviously a lot to unpack in the FY26 budget, and the council is obviously going to go through our process of oversight and conducting hearings, albeit a truncated process given the timing in which we received the budget, given those concerns and problems and issues created by officials in the federal government. But I do want to turn to my colleagues now to see if there are any questions. I see Brooke Pinto's hand and Zachary Parker. We'll start with Councilmember Pinto.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Councilmember McDuffie, and thank you, Mayor Bowser, and your entire team for this budget. When I thought about this year's budget and kind of looking through these slides to identify some shared priorities, I kind of think of things in 3 buckets: public safety, economic resiliency and growth, and supporting our young people and our seniors. And I'm thrilled to see a lot of investments in all of those categories. Want to especially thank you for the pay raise for OUC workers. That is so important. Enthusiastic to continue the discussions around the getting students to and from school safely in Ward 7 and 8, as you identified in these slides. Want to flag just for everybody that the Gallery Square investments are extremely important to me as the Ward 2 council member. And so when we think about areas of movement, I really hope those can be maintained. It is extremely important for our residents, our families, and our tourists to make sure that they can move up from the mall. Thank you also, City Administrator, for talking about the jail and kind of a new strategy there. I look forward to continuing to work together to make sure that all of the hard work of so many of our advocates are honored who have been working on this important mission for many years for a new design, and look forward to continuing the discussions to make sure we can move forward with a new facility. I wanted to ask you about kind of 2 areas. One is, what do you see as the role and intersection between our violence interruption network and the hiring of police officers? I don't have the full ONES budget in front of me, but I think there are some reductions in OAG's Cure the Streets program and ONES. And as we talk about the role of violence interrupter, how do you see that fitting into this framework of this budget? And then I have a question about literacy investments and in what ways this budget moves forward literacy investments for our kids, who are still really in need to learn how to read.
Well, thank you, Council Member, and I share your enthusiasm about the Gallery Square. It would be keeping faith with the commitments we made to the Gallery Place and Chinatown communities, and it's a contemplated synergy with the over $500 million investment we have in the arena. So it's very, very important. And we maintain our commitment to having a robust violence intervention network. And I will say Deputy Mayor Pia and Chief Smith have even more recently shared with me how it is helping in certain neighborhoods with driving down crime. So we remain committed to it, and I'll ask the CA to address any dollars.
I'll get more specific. There's no cuts in the 26 budget. I'm looking at Jenny to confirm. Small reductions that are not significant. In the 26, as you look at the out years, and I'm sure you should ask all folks to look at the out years, there are reductions as you go through the financial plan in the ONES is contracted VI work. It is incumbent upon all of us, it's a very important investment to be able to look at where around all the prevention work that at this point has its origins tracing back like 8 or 9 years. What do we know has had an impact? What are we not sure has had an impact? In being able to make sure the dollars go to where we have the largest impacts. So I think there'll be some deliberation we do across all the agencies working with your team. As it relates to the Cure the Streets work, we had funded, there was a significant amount of what I call unbudgeted excess revenue that had not been budgeted. That I understand would have, as a practical matter, been used to be able to apply to the Cure the Streets program. Because that was not, it was excess revenue, it was part of our balancing. So as we work with you through the process, we'll have to look at the totality of spend across the OAG, the ONES office, OVSJG, and other agencies that invest in prevention work to understand what's the highest, best use of funding. And then if the economy grows, those out-year cuts don't have to be materialized.
And to your question on literacy investments, Deputy Mayor, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I would.
Great.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Councilmember. We share your feeling of the incredible importance of literacy. I mean, clearly literacy starts in the following ways. We know that our fundamental investments in our systems writ large are the things that cause our young people to learn to read, and in particular to read by third grade. So the sustained investments in early childhood, so young people are ready for school when they get there, both in the Pay Equity Fund, in the P-Keep program, and in the subsidy for children in our early childhood programs is a core part of those investments. The increases for our public schools, including our elementary schools, including the pay increases for teachers, we know, bring the best teachers to those classrooms so that we're able to do that. We also understand literacy requires some extra work and extra energy, and so that's the reason the mayor decided to propose $3 million for high-impact tutoring, much of which is expended at the lower levels. We've sustained our investment in OSSI in high-quality instructional materials for the early grades for literacy. And as you know, we have provided funding for an on-demand structured literacy coursework available to teachers. So we feel good about where we are on literacy.
Okay. I just want to follow up on that. Is that fair to say then that the structured literacy training put in the budget last year is maintained but not expanded?
We have not repeated that because we have now provided on demand with that funding training that's available to all teachers. So we do not have the money for the stipends in the budget which we had this past year. Instead, we have chosen to invest in high impact tutoring and the instructional materials now that that training is available to all who need it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mayor and your team, on the investments that you've made. I want to continue with the focus on education. I will say at the outset, though, I think the child tax credit is an investment that would, in fact, attract families and is a way of us investing and giving back to our families. I look forward to working with my colleagues to reverse the proposed cut included in this budget. When I look at the education funding generally, it seems like there's a level of instability in the out years. There's a reduction in the UPSF, it seems like, by 3.8% in fiscal year 27. The Pay Equity Fund is zeroed out in fiscal year 27. And so I know some of that, Jenny, I heard you mention earlier, the hope is that the growth strategies work, and the hope is that those investments are returned to these line items. Can you speak to what preparation, if any, you're looking to have, and I guess that's more so for the mayor, with our school communities, given that there's likely to be a significant reduction in investment in the out years starting in fiscal year 27?
I would highly doubt that that I would stand here as mayor saying that there will be a significant change to DC public school funding or public charter school funding. When we get to that year, if we have not increased revenues, then we will be talking about more significant cuts elsewhere.
So right now in the budget, it looks like a nearly 4% decrease in fiscal year 27. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that's to balance the budget. But when we get to those fiscal years, schools should not anticipate significant drops in funding.
So let me just say, and for those who are watching, unlike anybody in America, any mayor in America, we balance our budget for 4 years. And part of that balancing has allowed us to be resilient and fiscally strong, but it also, no offense, CFO Lee, it requires the forecasts to be static. And I don't expect them to be, because of the work that we're going to do together will change the trajectory of our revenues and our expenses, which will allow us to invest in our priorities. So my hope, council member, is that when we are here, and not just my hope, but my direction to my team, is that we're going to fund the schools at the level that is needed, based on the number of kids we have, the number of schools we have, and what we need.
Okay. I understand that and I appreciate that. I think it is worth your team engaging with school communities, because when schools see this, because they too are planning for the out years, it causes significant alarm. And I think we're all on the same team here, wanting to invest deeply in our children. And school communities just want to know what's coming on the horizon.
Right. So we don't want alarm, but we do want action.
Yes.
And
but the number in the budget says a nearly 4% drop. So I think it's good for them hearing that there is a plan in the out years to address that, because I think the immediate reaction is, oh my God, we need to plan for this in regards to staffing, materials, et cetera. I did want to ask a very specific Ward 5 question. It seems like there's a plan for the infamous Mammo lot on Florida Avenue, and to exercise eminent domain. I think a lot of community members would support that. If you could speak to what your vision is there, and or what engagement you've had with the owners and or the community about it.
We've engaged with that lot over the last 10 years. We've had no movement on it, and quite frankly, the community and we are disgusted that it's in that condition. More than that, we need that lot to be productive so that people can either live there, work there, and certainly pay taxes there. So we are taking a different approach to vacant lots, and we have included some language in the Budget Support Act related to that. I have asked the Deputy Mayor in some other locations as well that I'm concerned about, for DMPED to be actively involved in either working with the owners to consolidate those spaces, or we will take another route. But I think this lot in particular is a poster child for government intervention.
And for what it's worth, I support activating this lot. So I think this is welcome news to a lot of Ward 5 residents.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I add something
Sure.
on the out-year school reduction? Councilmember, I just wanted to add a little bit more context. The change that you see in the out years would be reflected if we were to shift the fixed costs that are currently budgeted in DCPS out to DGS. So this is something I think you all shifted about $10 million last year. That's what we're proposing to do in the out years. That's why you see the number go down for the UPSFF. Not to cut schools, we're just shifting where the fixed costs are placed.
Okay, it's worth, I don't mean to keep going back and forth, but that's for one of our sectors. That doesn't speak to the pay differential for our charters. So is there a plan there?
I think the plan is, as the mayor stated, we will, when we rebuild the budget for FY27, we will look at what schools need.
Councilmember Allen.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, you and your team are putting this together. Let's see if we can get one as much. There we go. I did want to highlight one element. It's not the biggest item in the budget, but I think it's incredibly important. You identified the funding that you're continuing to put in for the heirs property program.
Yes.
On the legislative side, that's been a priority for me of helping reform our heirs property laws to help longtime families be able to build wealth in their homes in our city. You and your administration made it a priority with these programs, so I just want to lift that up. It's not going to be the biggest item in the budget, but it is really deeply impactful and important for families, so I really appreciate that. I did want to ask a couple of quick questions. I'll try to move through them quickly. Obviously, we'll dig more into the budget later. But as it relates to the DC jail, moving out the $460 million in capital dollars, so we have the $3 million left. We had previously tried to look at a PPP, a private partnership around it, and it was not successful to move forward in that direction. A couple of years ago, I remember being in this room when you put those capital dollars in the budget and commented it's a bold step, it's a brave step, it's hard sometimes to fund a jail. Why do we think that a private partnership is going to be more successful this time than it was when we tried this in the past?
Sure, Kevin.
It's a good question. So, because I sat here in front of you talking about the original jail investment. So, we've had over the course of the past 2 months at least a couple of unsolicited proposals. And now we'll do an RFQ and an RFP, but it suggested that there is an appetite in the private market from a financing standpoint to be able to take on the significant cost needed to be able to more quickly build the jail. We didn't, honestly, in our process internally, we turned our attention to that, not at the beginning. But when the planning process has been going on for a few years now, really clarified the amount of investment needed to actually build enough beds to close the current jail, it went up to about $1.4 billion. So far more than we could do in a short time, what we could do in a very long stretch of time of 10 or 12 years. So we occupy buildings as the government that we run, we maintain, we run the services that we don't own, that we didn't build. And so we're looking at a model not dissimilar to how DGS has private entities fund the construction of a building that we have a long-term lease for, that we occupy as tenants of the building. And functionally speaking, those buildings, there is no market outside of government for the occupancy of the buildings. So we recognize there's an appetite in the private market to be able to take on this size investment. And I think 8 or 9 years ago, or 6 or 7 years when we looked at it, we were looking at having full ownership and having the actual the asset on our balance sheet. I don't think we're looking at that now. And we, through DGS, have, I think, enough of a track record of having someone else construct a building for which we were the sole occupants, that in working with the CFO's team as we go forward, we will get the rules of the road and comply with the rules of the road. But there seems to be an appetite to take it on, and I think that's how we get the old Joes closed the fastest.
Thanks. I look forward to trying to think through how that could be successful.
Thank
the other
you.
piece, I am concerned about the cuts to TANF, the cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to paid family leave, the cuts to child tax credit. In my committee, I'm also really concerned about the cuts to the DC Green Bank, which looks like it's a 92% reduction, which all but eliminates the funding for the Green Bank and Green Finance Authority. This is an agency that we use to help build affordable housing, help lower utility costs. I would like to, I'm not going to support a cut like that. I also think there might be other models that we can think about around how to finance the work that's taking place there. I think the district could issue a green bond. I don't want us to cash out our energy and environmental goals in a tough budget, and so I want to flag that as something that's really concerning, because I think the DC Green Bank has proven the ability to help finance affordable housing, maintain and lower utility costs to maintain that affordability. So that is a cut that's deeply concerning to me. And then the last question I'll ask on the streetcar recommendations. So removing the funds to expand east, but maintaining for the next 2 years, I think is what you said, for what's there right now. Last year, we eliminated the DC circulator. Why would we go down the road of thinking about how to create a standalone or continue to do a standalone type of transit link or network, whatever we want to call it, next generation streetcar or bus, rather than work with WMATA to think about how to really amp up what our WMATA bus services, dedicated bus services could be there to go down Benning Road, expand east, connect to Union Station. Perhaps that's what the DDOT study and evaluation is going to look at, but that gives me pause just going through the experience we just went through of shutting down the circulator.
It is our intent to work with WMATA. So I think and I'll sort of clarify, when we ended the circulator service, as you know, we paid WMATA in additional funding beyond what would be in our normal bus obligation to be able to buy back either portions of those routes or entirety of those routes. So we had a collaborative partnership where as we sunsetted circulator, we also paid an additional amount to be able to have them operate effectively bus service they would not normally have operated but for the closure of the circulator. So with streetcar, and this is sort of, there's a savings and a cost avoidance. The cost avoidance is this inflation that I talked about. So we looked at the cost of, we have to replace the streetcars, they're old enough. We have to replace part of the track, we have to expand the track. When we added all that up together, it was hard to expect that for us to put it in for it to sustain even a council review. So I think what we'll do is work with WMATA to understand that we want to be able to look at that route, and also, and this is why I just didn't say bus service, nothing wrong with bus service, but the intent going in would be, could we make use of the overhead catenary lines to be able to have an electric bus? We know in other cities that have buses like that, they do have higher ridership. They're seen differently. So we have a chance to be able to both look broadly at how we go east-west in the city, including on H Street, but also make use of the infrastructure that we've already built there, though not the tracks, to be able to have a bus service that feels a little bit different in a way that streetcar made people feel a little bit different about that investment. And we knew the budget probably could not sustain the capital cost needed to really buy the new cars and extend the track over the course of the 6 years.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Felder?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Mayor. Kudos to your team for this, putting together this budget. I know it was an arduous task, having an opportunity to work on the executive side. I understand the many vicissitudes that go into putting a budget to this level together, so I just want to commend you guys. I do see that the proposed Ward 7 investments thoroughly pleased. I appreciate you, Mayor, for your commitment to Ward 7. My council colleague, Alan, he asked one of my questions, but I just have a follow-up question. I know, Mayor, when you said you were putting this budget together, you focused on the growth agenda, and you categorized questions that, does it keep our families safe? Does it create economic activity? Or does it attract businesses? Could you speak to any thought to how do we protect and invest in our low income and most vulnerable residents during this budget cycle?
Well, thank you, Council Member, and we are focused on that in every cluster. You heard some of the investments already that we've talked about with schools and housing. I remain committed to growing more affordable housing in the district and home ownership opportunities and jobs for DC residents. So our growth agenda is aimed at attracting more jobs to DC across the sectors to employ DC residents. We continue to invest in our Department of Employment Services and infrastructure training for DC residents to match them with opportunities in our city. We have talked about some of the programs that have to be right-sized because they are growing faster than our revenues are growing in the district. And we think that we can do that while making sure that our residents are not only being served, but are growing either in their profession, in their training, in having increased housing opportunities. So we continue to look at that. Specifically for Ward 7, you have talked about our need to activate commercial corridors, and we agree. We include some planning dollars for small area plans, I think in 3 Ward 7 neighborhoods. I shared with you when I was a new council member, my strategy for Ward 4 was to look at all of the areas that were underdeveloped, get small area plans or retail plans, as is the case on Kennedy Street, work with the community, get community buy-in, and also signal to the private sector community that this neighborhood is ready for investment. So we think that's important. And obviously the investment in RFK is a big, big thing for Ward 7, and not just at the RFK site, but we know the activity there and the private dollars that are being attracted to that site will continue to spur interest in underdeveloped parts of Ward 7. So we think, and I know that you all probably had the experience that I had in talking to people, they know about the sites, they're starting to be interested in the sites. Some people we have to re-interest in other sites, but we will.
Thank you, Mayor, and I look forward to working with my council colleagues throughout this process.
Thank you. Councilmember Fruman?
Thank you very much. One of the compass points is whether or not an investment will attract residents to the district. I will say that when I saw the outdoor heated swimming pool at Carter Barron, I texted my out-of-town children in hopes that
they will move
have
back.
that
Good.
effect.
We'll take them. All Frumans welcome.
Thank you. And that is great, but I mean, this is a budget that's going to be very hard on folks with the least, and that's a real challenge. And I wonder if you can help me understand on TANF, there's an adjust the temporary reduction in benefits for households who don't meet requirements for 4 consecutive weeks without good cause. What does that mean? What are those requirements, and what's that reduction?
Sure, we can talk a little bit about that, Matt, but just to kind of provide some context, we have a local program that is probably unlike any city in America, that is outside of the federal program. The federal program has certain time limits, I think 5 years. We have a local program that is agnostic to that federal program. Our local program gets bigger and bigger and costs more and more, and so it's just out of pace. So we have to better align to some limits, or we won't be able to afford that program. We currently, I think there are training and work requirements associated with TANF that we expect to enforce.
So, and that goes to things that are happening on the federal level, where we hear, requirements like that being contemplated for Medicaid. What kinds of investments are we making in this budget to try to help connect people to work? Because I think there's going to be more reliance on that for lots of things, including what we're doing locally. What are the pillars in this budget that you think go to that?
Well, I think that we, in this budget and with more work that we're going to be doing together around our federal strategies, we will be connecting DC residents to work, including people who this may be their first time looking for a job in 10 years. And we want to make sure that we have some strategies to keep them in DC and to get them reemployed in high growth sectors where they're earning good pay, and that's important across the board. Similarly, we are making sure that our residents, and I'll spend a minute talking about why I think I-82 is so important, because we know that service industries, hospitality, restaurants employ a lot of DC residents. Last year, we lost 1,700 jobs in hospitality, and other DC residents working in restaurants saw reduced pay. And so we think it is very, very important to address this policy matter and repeal 82 to keep people in good paying jobs and attract other DC residents to those jobs. Have anything else we want to highlight? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you for that. I do think that it's important for all of us to really closely dial in on the data on this question about restaurant jobs and what's been happening. So
we welcome that.
We need to debate it right now.
Okay.
On the Medicaid side, I hear my father saying, like, when something seems like it costs nothing, be worried about it. But on the Medicaid side, it looks like we take folks from 138% to 200%, and it's not that they lose coverage, it's that they go to another place, and yet there are savings, and we're presumably paying for them to be covered in that way. Where do the savings come from? Is it a reduction in benefits? How do we get savings from that move from one pot to another?
The savings come in two forms. If they go to the commercial marketplace through the exchange, there's no local cost. They get a premium subsidy based on their income. Their premium is capped as a portion of their income up to, I think, 8% if you're up 400% of federal poverty. So we don't pay anything for that.
It's a federal premium subsidy.
Yes, it's a tax credit. And then if they go to the basic health plan, that will be designed by the exchange. They can make it look just like Medicaid. They can use the Medicaid infrastructure. They can reduce co-payments, but none of that costs anything locally. It's all federal costs. As long as the cost doesn't exceed 95% of what they would have spent if they were in the exchange. So we avoid any local costs, and roughly the same coverage could be possibly available.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
We have Councilmember White, followed by Councilmember George.
Thank you again, Mayor, to you and your team. I'm very concerned, as I know a lot of people are, with dissolving P-Keep and the Pay Equity Fund, but Councilmember Parker raised those, so I won't re-raise those. But there's also a cut of $7.2 million in operating money that I put in the budget last year for public housing. How was that cut determined, and what impact do you see it having?
Council member, I believe that money was put in for maintenance and repairs, and part of the concern that we had about that investment was not the investment itself, but of how it sort of started to walk the line of DC Housing Authority becoming a component unit of the district, and some concerns that once you get into the ongoing operations and maintenance, it starts to blur that line a little bit. So we'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about some other ways that we could look at investments there. Also, I know the Housing Authority, as of right now, is also, because they haven't been able to fully staff up to where we want to be, is currently operating with a surplus.
Oh, so you don't believe the Housing Authority would be able to spend that money?
I mean, I think she's already addressed the question. There's surplus available.
But that's a different question. So specifically, you don't think, Mayor, that the Housing Authority would be able to spend that money on repairs and maintenance given the significant backlog?
I don't think it has.
Okay, it hasn't, but can it? So before we cut the money for next fiscal year, we've got to answer the question of whether or not they can spend it, because we know the need is there. So I'm trying to make sure we're as clear as possible.
Yeah, I think I've been clear. I think it hasn't spent it, and it has surplus to spend before we invest anything additional.
Okay, well, let me know the significant concern, because there has been an uptick in fixing issues, which means that I believe that they will start to accelerate spending. And there is, as all of us know, a substantial need for repair and maintenance in public housing. There's also a significant cut for emergency rental assistance. We work cooperatively across the government to tighten that program to ensure that the folks getting it are the ones that qualify. We also know that housing is just expensive and people are running into emergencies. So if you could talk to me about that cut, because again, it is substantial, and if we look at from 2 years ago, it starts to get more substantial.
So what you're referring to, there was no reduction to the baseline budget for ERAP. So the baseline budget has always been around $7 to $8 million for emergency rental assistance. What happened was there was one-time funding added last fiscal year that didn't recur. And unfortunately, we faced that across a number of programs. And given the fiscal situation that we're in, it was impossible to put back every dollar of one-time funding. That being said, we do know that there is housing issues that folks are facing, and so you saw the mayor put in additional investment of $2.9 million into the homelessness prevention program. We believe that the homelessness prevention program is a better targeted solution to avoid families experiencing homelessness, because it gets them upstream as opposed to when they're facing eviction. So ERAP kind of was the only tool for a long time, but it got to people too late. We're trying to invest in other tools that are farther upstream so that we can really reserve ERAP, emergency rental assistance, for people truly experiencing emergencies.
Okay, the homelessness prevention was a different category of folks. That's folks who are not housed, and this is people who are housed, who we want to keep housed and keep out of our homeless system, because it becomes incredibly expensive once they get there. So I'd like us to talk more about that, because I could see it creating more costs for the district. On the growth agenda, I mean, we heard, and you said, Mayor, that the CFO projected that we could lose as many as 40,000 DC jobs as a result of some shifts in federal policies. For the growth agenda on page 10, have you projected the number of jobs that you believe will be created from this?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I mean, we will have to work very hard. Let me just be incredibly clear. We'll have to put all of our resources to retaining and attracting new businesses. But we are estimating that if we fully fund the growth agenda, and then we will continue to contribute to that, that we could replace the jobs that are being lost in the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. If you could share the data for that, because I am concerned, as I know you are, both about the job losses, but also about the vacancies downtown. And my hope is that we have a very targeted plan to attract mid-sized businesses in particular, ones that would fill that office space and fill the job opportunities from federal workers that are reeling from a change in the environment. One of my final things, with the stadium, which does impact a significant aspect of the budget, how much of the money will go from the stadium will go to the city's operating budget as direct revenue from the stadium? So I'm looking at ticket sales, food and merchandise, parking, and taxes going to the team or the stadium, but I'm not to our revenues to address our budget deficit. So how much would we expect from the stadium to go into our general fund?
We could, so you've broken it down by different types of uses. We would need to break that, take a look at that exactly. But if I recall correctly, over the next 30 years, we're talking from the stadium only, not from the mixed-use development around the stadium or any of those restaurants or hotels or other things that would be delivered with the stadium, but just from the stadium alone. There is the sales and ticket tax would not come to the city, but all other types of taxes would, and we're estimating that, like income tax, for example, would be approximately $1 billion over the next 30 years.
And we can go into the detail for this, but just in sort of the first few years of its opening, so not year 20 or 30, it's expected to generate over $800 million in direct spending. So think of all the funds that get spent there, get spent in the mixed-use development around it, would generate taxes across from income tax to hotel tax, with just personal earnings alone being over $200 million. So it is an investment that produces an outsized amount of economic activity given the nature and success of that enterprise.
All right. Those numbers will be important. Mayor, we met 22 days ago. You said you would share your revenue projections with us so that we could understand it. We followed up a lot of times, but still trying to get it. And it's hard to make sense of this without that.
Oh, I thought you had a meeting last week.
We've had plenty of meetings.
Okay,
but
you didn't get it.
No.
Well, let me just put this, well, not on the record, in front of all of you. For the stadium, we estimate 14,000 construction jobs, 2,000 permanent jobs, $14 billion in direct spending, and this is so small, and $2 billion in total taxes. That's for the stadium district itself. If you add the mixed-use district, $14,000 to $17,000 of total jobs, $2 billion in taxes, up to 5,000 to 6,000 of new homes, and $1.6 billion in direct spending. We think we could have up to 10,000 new residents. If you total those, it would be $4 billion in total taxes.
Okay. That's a big number. Again, I've not been able to find an economist anywhere in the country who can help me figure out how we get there or anywhere close. And so understanding how you get there will be really important for us because, again, we want to help you get this done, but we need you to help us to help you. So, what I'll close out by saying is I see this as a fork in the road budget. This is the first revenue deficit in 30 years. The last time the city had a deficit, we did dig out, but we dug out by pushing out a lot of longtime residents, including my family. And the question for us is how we dig out of this deficit this time in a way that doesn't push out people with the lowest incomes. Now, we all have to make some hard decisions and some compromises, but we've got to be really clear that we can't repeat the mistakes of the past. So I'm looking really closely at, you know, the burdens and the benefits of the people who have the less the least to make sure. And I'd love to know how this approach is different than the approach we took 30 years ago.
Councilmember Lewis George.
Well, that was a question.
Oh, I wasn't here 30 years ago, and if you could be more specific about the approach, the comparison you're making.
I think the average person knows this, Mayor. I hope you know too the displacement that happened. Thank you. I think it's not a secret, Mayor, what happened to district residents, longtime district residents 30 years ago. I wasn't here either, but I know it because I felt it. And I think you know it too. I think most of us here know it. And so I don't want us to pretend like we don't know the potential impact if we don't make the right decisions now. We can see revenue growth without pushing people out, and that is the charge that everybody in positions of power have right now. So I want to make sure we all know that.
Again, I don't, like, if you were specific in your question, I would venture a response. But this is one thing that I'm sure of, Council Member. When the city was losing residents and losing businesses, when we were the murder capital of the world, when nobody wanted to go to our schools or use our recreation centers, we were in a downward spiral. And I think our relentless commitment to public education in public schools has led to an increase in the number of people who live here. I think the strategies that I have pursued for the last 10 years to create more housing for people and more good paying jobs is the strategy that we have to continue to follow. What we cannot do is suggest to anyone that we can only pay for programs that keep getting more expensive without also increasing the number of jobs and revenue we have. It just doesn't work, because what will happen is you will overtax your businesses and you will overtax your residents to the point they say, why do I live here? And we cannot do that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to your team once again. I want to ask in 3 different categories. So I'm going to start with some citywide questions and then go to my facilities committee chair hat, and then last 2 will be our great Ward 4 questions I have. First, I just wanted to know, for citywide questions, are the cuts and policy changes to paid leave, that's for DC government workers only, or for the universal paid leave program run by DOES? And then the second part to that is, similarly, are the payroll tax changes for the tax that now goes to our general fund, or are they changes to the 0.27% universal paid leave portion of the overall payroll tax? And then the third question is, am I correct in that Alliance is basically zeroed out in overall in this budget?
So let me start with your paid family leave question. We're recommending changes to both programs. The change to the DC program, and I'll add, I think we pointed to that in one of the slides, but it is very necessary to deal with our overtime issues, and we have to limit it. I think every director in this room will tell you we need these changes, and we needed them yesterday. Number 2, we do recommend some changes to the citywide, the private program run by DOES. And I'll ask Jenny to talk about, we mostly, I think, limit some eligibility. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I think your question was about the payroll tax and the reduction that we include. Right. Do the benefits go to the general fund? And the answer to that is yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So for the universal paid leave program, what I was speaking to earlier in the presentation was for the DC employee program.
Okay.
For the universal paid leave, the maximum weekly benefit will be at $1,000. The maximum weeks for family leave will go down to 6 from 12, and the maximum weeks for own medical leave will go down from 12 to 8. There's no changes to parental or prenatal leave.
Got it. Understood. Thank you for those clarifications.
In either case, for the DC program, either.
Okay. And then for Alliance, it's just eligibility changes.
Say
not-
again?
The Alliance question, it was just the eligibility changes versus a complete sort of elimination.
We have shifted, like the discussion we previously had about Medicaid, we have shifted the program and will create a different program.
Understood. And then for facilities, am I correct in that, I guess, the Greener Government Buildings Act is being repealed, or it looks like the Net Zero Energy Ready Building Code Amendment Act, I guess it abolishes the Net Zero Readiness Standard and then delays implementation of a sort of a new watered down standard until about 2032. I guess, am I seeing that correct? And I'm just wondering why we would sort of in that sense, abandon some of our climate commitments or delay our climate commitments in that regard. In addition, I see the Mayor's Office of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. It looks like it has been, transferred. It looks like it's transferred to DDS, and I'm wondering, sort of that office took a long time of advocacy and leadership, and so I just wonder what the vision is for that, and sort of why it wouldn't be transferred to Office of Disability Rights instead. And then I wanted to just ask about school maintenance. I just wanted to understand the reasoning behind shifting the $15 million from DGS facilities budget for public education cluster to DCPS. I guess on the DGS side, that looks like a 23% cut, but I guess where was it put in the DCPS budget?
So I'll start with the last question first. So the DGS budget, part of what you're seeing from that shift is the electricity costs are being paid for from the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund. So there's no cut to electricity costs, but some of the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund is now going to pay for increased electricity costs for DGS that happen to be at DCPS.
Understood.
You had also asked about the merging of the Office of Deaf, Blind, Hard of Hearing into the Department of Disability Services. We felt like that was the best location. The Office of Disability Rights is small and very focused on particular issues. We feel like there's better infrastructure in the Department of Disability Services to support the office going forward. And then you had one more question.
Greener Government Buildings.
Greener Government Buildings. So there's a pause there, and it's really not that the mayor and we are not committed to meeting our climate goals. The vast majority of our buildings are designed and able to be built at net zero. Unfortunately, we do have a few instances where it's just not workable because of the site or because it's asking the district to take on a technology that has not been tested anywhere else. And we don't necessarily want to be the first in order to not be able to properly maintain it going forward. So I think if there's further discussions we could have about ways that there could be more flexibility for these types of instances, I think that would benefit. But for the most part, they are designed to be net zero.
Gotcha. And then lastly, the two things I wanted to mention were really grateful for the continued commitments and capital funding. The only two things I'm worried about is I see the VI program under ones. It looks like increasing from fiscal year 25, but the Cure the Streets within OAG is down from 9.3 to 1.9 million. And I just want to make sure that that does not mean the violence interruption work that has gone well in Ward 4 is eliminated as a result of that reduction I'm seeing from 9.3 to 1.9. So just want to make sure we continue to have violence intervention work in Ward 4. And then the second thing is I'm really excited about the library, Juanita Thornton, Shepherd Park Library, as well as the work that's going to be done at Petworth. I do want to continue, as we talk about Kennedy Street, we still do need that anchor and a library resource within Kennedy Street. And I know I put money in the out years that I think is not there. So I wanted to just make sure there's a continued commitment to creating a government anchor on Kennedy Street with library resources. And that also Ward 4 would continue to have violence intervention work, which has been working in our Petworth and Kennedy Street neighborhoods.
Thank you. I appreciate the maximizing your time. So I will start with the VI work and then pass it to Jenny for some of the other questions you raised. So I do want to reiterate sort of something I said when I responded to Councilmember Pinto. So I think over the course of this budget, we're going to have to sort of look at all the pools of money that we fund violence intervention work with to be able to identify what's the highest and best use of it. I think in part the bill before the council that Councilmember Pinto put forward that merges functions might help force this conversation about what's the highest best use of money. From my understanding, I want to qualify at that because this is part of the OAG's budget, is that a substantial portion of the Cure the Streets funding was going to be funded out of excess revenue that had not been budgeted for. As part of our balancing, without picking on any one agency, across all agencies, if there was money that the agency was generating in an account that had not been budgeted for, we wanted to utilize that for balancing purposes because it was not a fund we're cutting. Except in cases where it sounds like my understanding is that there was an intended use of that excess revenue, but perhaps not one in the budget itself, which would have been part of the Cure the Streets. So that's why you see a reduction, I think, in Cure the Streets. That's why I think as we have this deliberation when the budget goes to the council, I think we have to look at all the different funding sources that we use to be able to invest in violence intervention work, which does have measurable impacts, and understand how to make the highest best use of it.
So that's a no. Ward 4 will not be getting a cut to violence intervention.
The only other thing, council member, is on the, I believe you had $2 million set aside in the 25 supplemental. That is no longer there.
That's right.
And so here you, I'm wanting to continue to have conversations around development of Kennedy Street.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
And the only thing I would say, just on Cure the Streets, since that program's not run by us, I don't know if we can answer that, but we will talk to the Attorney General's office.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're after 1 o'clock, so Anita's going to close us out with a question.
All right, thank you very much, thank you for this very interesting budget plan as we move into the new fiscal year. I wanted to ask about your growth agenda, where you're leaning on sports, entertainment, and technology, expanding gaming opportunities. Just wondered, how do you see that operating, and whether or not you have put a dollar amount to what that would cost? Are we thinking about also using our restaurants as well as our sports facilities?
Right now, Anita, we, as I understand it, it was not scored, right? Correct. So there's no revenue included here, although, you know, we could argue that we know it's going to generate some, but we don't have a great estimate right now of how much it would generate. Our thought is to work with ABCA, ABC or ABCA now, who works with licensees and get their thoughts, work with the CFO's office, who's responsible for lottery and games, get his thoughts. Our initial kind of thinking around the tournaments is that we would open them up to our hotel properties. Our initial thinking around the commercial bingo is that we would open them up to restaurants.
Thank you very much about that. And I just wanted to comment on the proposed move of the archives from UDC, and just wondered, as we're thinking about that facility, what is your new price tag for that? Because we had a clear about $100 million if we were at UDC, so what's your price tag?
Well, let me start by saying we had $100 million budgeted, and we got new estimates for the building to be $150 million, which necessitated us to kind of rethink that. Let me go back to this one. And so when I was thinking about the additional $50 million in capital investment, I had to compete it with other things. We think we have a great plan to have a front-facing facility and to build a more modern storage facility. And how much total?
So it'll be 29 million. So it's 24 million for the facility and 5 million for the Sumner School, necessary renovations to make it the front-facing location.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to a hearing on the matter and, of course, learning more so
And Anita,
that we
if I
can
could
have it
just,
in the process.
Councilmember, if I could just add that we maintain the demolition funds, and we make that space now back available to UDC, and their top priority is student housing.
And that's exciting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councilmember Bowser, we're going to turn next to Councilmember Henderson, actually, to close this off. I missed you earlier.
Very brief, because I know folks' stomachs are grumbling at this particular time. I want to express thanks in terms of working very closely with Deputy Mayor Turnage and your team on the health portion of this. So I have questions, but they're very detailed questions, so we'll get to them at the hearings. But I don't want folks to think that my lack of questions is a lack of understanding. There's a lot of stuff that is going on the health portion of this budget. Some of it local, some of it we got to deal with on the federal side. But through this process, we've had a commitment to ensuring that as many people as possible can maintain health insurance. And you didn't have to do that. The team didn't have to do that. And so we'll go through the specifics of that when we get there. The same can be said on the human services stuff. The slides are cute, but they give high level. And so I want to encourage people to dig in, because there are a lot of issues that I think we need to debate and deal with in terms of some of these programs that traditionally have had we've had the funding for, and now we don't. And so we have to make some very tough questions on that. I did want to ask two really quick things. One around food investments. Obviously on the national level, we've got some changes coming. Perhaps, I don't know, let's see if they can get it together in terms of SNAP, WIC, and some other things. So what we do locally is going to be hugely important, and I know that our food banks are already stretched. And my second question is more for the operational support. I don't want Chris to feel like we've sort of left out here. But when we talk about the growth agenda and how people are welcome to Washington, D.C., some of that is through our websites, how they interact with our agencies. A lot of our agencies have good websites. DLCP has done a lot of work, DDOT, DOES, et cetera. And then so for some of our friends, particularly in the human services cluster, it has been on the struggle bus. For a number of years, we have been talking about investments in a citywide overhaul of our IT infrastructure. And I want to, did that get left on the cutting room floor as we go forward?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. So we continue to invest in our IT infrastructure, both from a cybersecurity standpoint as well as the ability to build out different websites and tools. So we continue the work that was previously funded for the DC Business Portal to continue to expand the functionality and usability of that. There's continued funding to overhaul the DC.gov website, and then funding to make sure that we maintain a good cybersecurity posture. I did just want to touch very quickly on your question about food assistance, Mayor, if I could.
Sure.
And just that you will not see reductions to food assistance programs in this budget. We were able to add $425,000 to the Department of Aging and Community Living to expand home delivered meals for about 150 seniors. But we know that there's a lot of issues with food security, so there's no reductions to the programs you would see funded at, like DC Health, Healthcare Finance, and other agencies.
And I want to thank you, Council Member, for being so engaged on the Medicaid issues. And I want to acknowledge Jackie Bowens, who is here from the DC Hospital Association, because collectively, I think we have pushed off right now the kind of singular attack on DC as it relates to FMAP, which could be like a $2 billion impact on the district. But I think also we are really focused on, as you say, maintaining coverage and making the program sustainable. So thank you for being so engaged with that. Council Member,
I think we are at a point where we reached the closing, so I will just close it by offering my thanks to you, Mayor. I know you all
didn't
had
get to ask your questions.
You know what? I'm going to have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Later when the council starts this oversight process, but sincerely I want to thank you all. I know we had a number of conversations leading up to the day, and met with some of the members of your team, including Nina Albert, and a lot of tough choices that you all had to make to get us to this point today. I also want to acknowledge the absence of Chairman Mendelson. I know a lot of folks are wondering, but he had a previously scheduled engagement. This came about maybe a few days ago last week, and so he could not reschedule that. So I want to acknowledge the chairman. And I also want to just reiterate the council's dedication to a very transparent process that we engage in every single year, that we plan to do again this year. Again, a truncated process, but it's going to culminate in a few votes. But the process starts soon. It starts May 29th with the council's hearings that are already scheduled. That's going to culminate in a few votes on July 14th, the 28th, and I believe the 31st may be the last one. And so finally, I want to just say, last year we were here and I asked an important question, and kind of dovetails on the exchange that the mayor and Councilman White had earlier about where we were a few decades ago and how bleak things were for the city. And I recall asking a question last year because Mayor Williams asked a question a few years ago when he said, have we worked out a way to both grow the city and make it work for everyone? I think it's still a relevant question today, and it's really going to guide my work as chair of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I've got a few simple questions that I'm going to be looking to answer as I review the budget. Does it keep people safe? Does it invest in education and businesses that create jobs? And how does it make the city more affordable and more inclusive for everyone to live? And I think, I imagine, having talked to you, Mayor, that those are goals that help and guide your process. And I know in talking to my colleagues, it's things that we always wrangle with when we have this oversight process. And so, again, we're going to engage, and we're encouraging the participation from all stakeholders, residents, small business owners, nonprofit advocates, to make sure that we align the budget that's been presented to the council with the values that are shared across our city. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, council members.